Hello Jovials, great to be back. It's the night before the day that we finally get another camp in after 3 months. It's been a tough summer for us both. We've not had much time to get out on the fells. However, looking forward to it tomorrow. I'm currently in the process of packing. Wife's not probably going to be very happy because I've just pulled out some socks that I think have grown different types of fungus that have never been discovered before. But the plan is, as we said in the last video, I upgraded my tent to the Banshee Hydra, and we said we'd do a full review of it, or I would. And the plan was to go to Collins this afternoon and do that review, but I think with it being nearer to the winter now, the nights are drawing in, and by the time I get there, it's either going to be too dark, and he's also just had quite a large extension put on his house, and I'm not even sure if his garden's big enough to get it in there and get a good review in. Now, fortunately, it's beautiful weather here at my house, so I'm going to do the review on my own, and we'll put it up in the garden. I'll film that, and then I'll run you through the pros and cons of this tent, what I think to it, why I changed from the Banshee, and whether or not I would recommend it to you. So looking forward to that. I'll see you in the garden. Okay, so I've flipped cameras now to a handheld phone. So, why change from the Banshee 200? One word, space. It's really quite simple. We said that in the last video. The Banshee 200, despite it saying on Van Gogh's website that it's a two-man tent, isn't. It's barely manageable with one. And we were finding with all our gear that there was just insufficient space in it. So I decided to try and look for a similar sort of footprint tent that might offer me a bit more room, and that turned out to be the Hydra. Now, it's erected now, and that you've just seen. I'll probably have sped that up, but in real time, probably argue that for the first time that actually went up in the time that Van Gogh quote. So that's quite impressive. It's a lot easier to put up, and that's only the third time I've done it. So granted, it's in my garden, there's no wind and there's no rain, but it gives you an indication that it will go up definitely in under 10 minutes. Let's go and have a look at the tent. So this is the Van Gogh Hydra. Very similar in terms of construction to the Banshee. Sports a 5,000mm hydrostatic head, which is virtually bomb-proof, and I would argue for wild camping, pretty much a requirement, really. I think with the weather that we go on, it sports the crossover poles as opposed to a tunnel-type design, which is supposed to enhance its stability considerably. And I think if you've seen our last video, it's testament to the design because it withstood well in excess of 60-mile-an-hour winds in the wrong position. It was driving sideways to the tent, and it managed to survive that no problem at all and didn't leak in the slightest. So in terms of design then, quite a lot different to the Banshee. It doesn't sport two doors either side. It's not a huge problem, but it does mean, of course, that if you're camping with a friend like I do, you almost end up sort of you can't get parallel to each other. You're almost tangential because For me to be able to see him, I have to go at right angles to his tent, and he's still got that flexibility of having the dual door. However, this, you could argue, would also have the advantage if you knew that there was a prevailing wind that was going to bring bad weather. You could pitch with the rear towards that weather, and you'd probably be fairly safe at the door end. It does have dual access, so obviously the right side is open at the moment. There's also a left side here that opens in exactly the same way. Now, what I really like about this already is it includes this carpet. Well, carpet, it's basically a piece of tarpaulin, but that fits, I haven't put it in at the moment, but that fits basically in your dry area here, which is at the front. So if I sort of close it off, you can sort of see already you've got a substantially larger footprint area to store things externally of the tent. And with having that carpet, that's a massive advantage over the 200. I found that to be so helpful on the last camp because you really can keep your kit dry. Okay, now in terms of externals, design wise, what I think is so clever about this is the way that the weathering is designed to get rid of rain, meltwater, whatever, because it almost has like a guttering system that runs through, and there's basically holes, which you can see here, where water can run freely. It's very clever, and it's very effective, and what it does is it basically eliminates the problems that we were finding on the Banshee 200, because there's nowhere really where water can pool, and no pooling water is always a good thing because you will stay dry. So having tested it in those conditions and being confident now that it doesn't leak, I think perhaps that Vango have learned a few lessons from the 200, and these cutout systems here, this genius sort of guttering system, the way the poles go, I think has made a massive difference from the 200 in terms of its weather sealing. Okay, moving inside, the next thing you'll notice is how much larger it is than the Banshee 200. Now, when I say how much larger, I would probably argue coming on twice the size. But we run into the next set of disadvantages I found. Despite it being far larger, Vango in their infinite wisdom have decided to remove a huge amount of the storage space. You basically get a small pocket here and a small pocket on the other side. The entire length of the inner tent is storageless, that's not ideal. I'll be honest with you, that's not ideal. But they're obviously working on the fact that you require less storage because you can put more outside. Now, internally wise, very similar sort of design to the 200. It's got an inner fly which basically hangs in free space from the external shell, and that guarantees you weathering. And I would recommend that you put that up in your garden, something like this, before you actually go camping. It makes life a lot easier. So obviously on the 200 review we had a bit of a giggle and used the pressure washer to test the weathering. I don't feel it's necessary on this tent because basically you can just watch our last video and it doesn't get much better testing than that. So I absolutely can guarantee that it will survive really quite nasty winds and a lot of water. So we have no issues with the weathering like that. I don't need to show that part of the test. What this is basically demonstrating is how much more space you have over a Banshee 200 in the Hydra. Now obviously the biggest con probably in terms of wild camping with this is it's bigger, so it's slightly heavier, definitely. It's probably about 50% more expensive. The Banshee 200s are now under £100, whereas this is still touching 150, which is not exactly cheap for a wild camping tent. But at the same time, I'm confident, having used it now, that I think that's a fair price based on its durability. And obviously, as long as you take care of your tents, as soon as you come back after a camp like we had last time, you need to be getting that tent out quick, drying it off, resealing if necessary. But I think £150 is quite reasonable. Again, it was mentioned it's only available on Amazon. It seems to be a Vango deal with Amazon. I'm sure there is a tent that's identical with a similar name, but A, I can't remember it, and B, this is the one that I was most attracted to, so I went with this one. So I'm just bringing my 80 litre pack that I take on the wild camp. Such a big bag, much bigger than Colin's, but it means I can get everything inside it, which is great. So I'll just take that to the tent to give you an idea of scale, because it's difficult on these cameras sometimes to appreciate just what sort of sizes you're looking at. So we'll take this inside. And I'll flip the camera around. Okay, so there's an 80 litre bag relative to the size of the tent, but in all reality this stays outside now, and that's the biggest advantage. See, in that storage area it fits in less than half of that space. So quickly just pull that over to give you an idea. When that's closed, you have still a substantial amount of room to store all of your cooking utensils, wet boots, socks, clothing, anything like that. Way more than enough room. Which means, of course, inside you've basically got now unlimited space. So you could bring essentials in with you, whichever bits you wanted to, and leave the ones that are wet or you don't need outside. So you've just got that extra flexibility in the tent. Now, would I argue it's too big? I think in the ideal world, the best tent to be conceived would be a Banshee 200 merged with this one. If they could make this one maybe 15% smaller, you'd probably have the dream wild camp tent. But as long as you can find anywhere that's relatively good for pitching, relatively flat, relatively dry, it's no problem to get this tent up. And although I've only taken it out once, I didn't have a problem finding somewhere to pitch the tent. But you have to take that into consideration. Of course, it's a bigger tent, so you're going to need a bigger footprint, bigger dry areas, and flatter in a larger area to pitch this tent. But I personally will not go back to the Banshee 200 unless we are going somewhere that's so extreme, so remote, that I think size will become a problem. But for me, the Hydra is basically the Banshee 200 1.5. It's I think it's better weather sealed. I think it's more practical in terms of how you put it up, because you can get the poles in. It seems to go up a lot quicker than the Banshee 200 did, because it's that little bit heavier. In winds it doesn't blow away as easily when you're trying to put it up, and I just appreciate that extra room. So pros, it's larger, it seems to be better weather sealed, and it does seem to be slightly easier to actually erect. Cons, there's definitely less storage inside. The doors are on, or the door is only on the front, even though it's got two entrances. You do miss that dual access either side, so you have to be careful about the direction that you pitch the tent in. You really want the lower end into the prevailing wind, and then your door area should be sheltered from the wind. It's obviously larger, so it's heavier, so you have to carry that either externally from your bag, or if you've got a larger bag like mine, you can get it inside, but it does weigh a bit more. So that's always going to be a con if you're trying to travel light. But I thoroughly recommend it. I think it's been a good upgrade from the Banshee 200. I know Colin's already iffing and butting about whether or not to upgrade his tent, and I can guarantee you he'll go for the same tent as me. But I think overall it's a good tent. It works well. It's definitely suitable for the sorts of weather that we get here in the UK, in the Lake District, Wales, Scotland. I think it would endure that easily. We're in winter now, so we'll almost certainly be going out again in weather where there's snow, blizzards, and it'll be interesting to see how it survives that. But so far, so good. And I'll probably switch back to the other camera now and give you an idea of how easily it goes back into its bag, and the sort of size that the tent is when it's packed away. So I hope this review was useful for you. It's a little bit shorter than the Banshee 200 review was, but that's because I think we've covered so much more of the practicalities of it actually in real time on the previous video. So by all means, comment, questions, anything you'd like to know, leave them in the comments, and I'll endeavour to answer them all. Hope you enjoyed this, guys, and we'll see you on the fellas tomorrow.